All I'm saying is the next Disney Plus MCU show that gets announced better be about alligator Loki or I'm gonna riot. Hello interwebs and welcome to my review of Loki episode 5, Journey into Madness. I don't know know what the voice was there, but as usual I'm going to do my spoiler-free review up front and then I will get into spoilers. I'm going to honestly keep this spoiler-free section very short because I need to gush about this episode in these spoiler sections. So spoiler-free stuff up front. I loved this episode. This episode is everything that I've loved about this series, all rolled into one, and then it just kept going beyond that. There is some crazy balls to the wall insanity here that really pays off everything that I've wanted this series to do so far. There's just some insane stuff that you get to see here, from like the most minutia insane little Easter eggs that I'm sure people will be poring over for days after this episode comes out. There's some really, really great ones, I should say, that even I caught, and I'm sure there's more that I totally missed. There's some insanity just with the timeline stuff going on that I don't want to spoil too much of. There's excellent humor, like that sort of MCU humor that we've come to know, but it doesn't feel fastidious. It doesn't feel like it's just sort of there to negate the action. But for the most part, it's either there, it's just a really good bits, or it actually helps facilitate the stuff going on, which is something that I know a lot of people criticize about the MCU. But there's also some really great development between all the characters, and I think that's really the most important part here. All of the characters get a lot to do, but I think the standout performer of this was Tom Hiddleston. I mean, it is his show, and he's been giving an excellent performance each week, but this episode really struck me how much Tom Hiddleston has been able to convey a Loki on a journey. Just looking at where Tom Hiddleston is now in this episode, he really just shows everything about how this Loki has changed through all the experiences that he's had. This Loki is very much not the Loki that we started with, and you just see that in his performance, the depth and nuance and just difference in his demeanor and how he performs this character. You really just feel the change, and I just want to give extra highlight to Tom Hiddleston here, but everyone was doing a fantastic job overall. But this episode, where, well, I could kind of see where it was going, left me on the edge of my seat, just really enjoying every moment of the journey, and really just absolutely loving it, and has me very excited for next episode. So honestly, to wrap up my spoiler-free section, super high praise for this episode. It just wonderful character moments, crazy balls to the wall, action, insanity, time travel stuff, some great character moments, but also some really great humor in here as well. But let's get into spoilers. All right, now that we're in spoiler section, I'm going to go through each chunk of this episode because I really just want to talk about each little piece of it because it was just, I cannot tell you how much I loved this episode overall. The first bit I want to talk about is the opening stuff with Sylvie and Renslayer. I loved Sylvie kind of being devastated and pissed off at Renslayer, and Renslayer basically trying to convince her that, I want to know this stuff too, and I can help you, I can get to Loki, and sort of giving her this information and explaining this stuff about the void, this void at the end of time, that everything gets dumped into, something we're seeing with, our Loki, over in the void, which I'll talk about in just a second, but sort of like giving us exposition, but in a very sort of in a way that's sort of coming out of these character dynamics and sort of them sort of coming at each other. I also like the stuff that Renslayer was talking about with the dogma, about how like the void is sort of this place at the end of time where the timekeepers were supposed to be building something, that they were building a utopia, very much kind of highlighting the religious aspect of these timekeepers. I sort of liked that that sort of concept being evoked and evolved here, of this sort of religious aspect to the timekeepers that Renslayer is still kind of falling into, but now sort of seeing crumbling before her. The other thing that I loved in this moment too was when they sort of were talking about going to the end, and I also loved the exposition of the end of time, that the person who is controlling everything must be past the void, because that's where time sort of hasn't been written yet, and so there's many different timelines, and so that's what they have to be. And I thought that was just a really cool, heady, but weird and strange, but perfectly fitting within the idea of the show for this to figure out. And I love that Sylvie gets to be the one to detective that out, really showing her smarts and how smart she is. But the other thing that I really loved about this moment was there was the moment where it seems like Renslayer and Sylvie are about to work together, and they bring up like, oh, we have this time ship or that can go to the end of time that can get us there. It's a prototype sort of thing. And I literally was writing down in my notes as that happened, convenient prototype is convenient. And I love that immediately after that, Sylvie starts to realize that too. It's like, that's a little bit convenient. And it was all the play by Renslayer. I loved that. I loved that I'm catching on, and this character is as smart as me watching the show. And it was just a really cool play by Renslayer. And I loved the moment where they're sort of going back and forth, and, you know, Renslayer's trying to convince her to come out. Obviously not going to work. And Sylvie has this moment, it's like, I did have one moment of happiness. And I love that the episode didn't feel like a need to highlight it, but we know what she's talking about. The moment with Loki, you know, 2 episodes ago, or 1 episode ago at the beginning of the Nexus event, last episode, they were holding hands, and she prunes herself. That was so excellent. I loved every little bit of that. Staying on Renslayer, just because she has one more real scene here, you really get to sense that she is pissed off and angry at the entire situation. So she goes to visit 32, and I love 32 being like, look, you may want to know who the timekeepers really are, but Sylvie needs it, and really just highlighting the difference between the two. And I love Renslayer being so pissed off. You really get this, like, anger at the betrayal on so many levels that she's feeling in these moments. And I'm really just loving her development as sort of a sub-boss, sort of even kind of the main antagonist of the series, really, even if we considering that whoever the timekeepers are, or the person is, they're sort of still haven't even been seen yet. So she really is the main antagonist driving stuff here, and I love seeing just her simmering rage. I think the actress performs it supremely well throughout this entire episode. Jumping over to the other stuff going on here at the Void with our Loki, sort of Tom Hiddleston Loki. Everything about this was sheer joy. Richard E. Grant is just a fun as classic Loki. I love Tom Hiddleston's just trying his best to figure out what's going on. It's like, I'm rolling with the alligator. I don't know what's going on here, but I'm doing my best. That was a ton of fun. I love the surprise that Kid Loki was, his Nexus event was that he killed Thor. That was absolutely fun. And again, getting this sort of exposition here of what the Void is and what the sort of monster here at the end of time is. I forget the name of it. The sort of CGI monster mess that they're going to have to face at the end of the episode, which was probably the weakest part of this, but even that wasn't bad. I enjoyed it, even though it was just big CGI monster. But I like it being a second tier thing. I'll talk about that in a second. But anyways, I liked sort of getting the exposition that it was a thing that eats stuff, and just sort of this thing that they're trying to avoid here. All really good. But the real heart of this scene was when they were sort of down in their little Loki hole. And I love sort of every Loki kind of getting a moment to shine. But in particular, Richard E. Grant's story of like, you know, I did everything right. I did everything that I was supposed to do in my timeline. But then I took time for myself and really thought about my life. And the moment where I really felt like I had changed, the TVA came in and stopped me. We're just gods of outcasts, and we don't ever get the chance to change. And I like that Tom Hiddleston is just saying, like, no, I have changed. One of us is different. Sylvie is different, and that's what changed me too. And you can see that again in Tom Hiddleston's performance. He's not saying that he's changed, but he is changed, and I think all the other Lokis pick up on that, and I think that's really just a lot of fun. Also, I should say here, the little Thor in the glass bottle, that was a lot of fun. I love seeing that. But yeah, no, that whole sequence was just, I really bought that, and it was just, it really, I loved Richard E. Grant's performance, and I loved all of this discussion here, and just a lot of fun too, with like the one Loki being like, I caught all the Infinity Stones, you know, sort of boasting in a Lokian way was a lot of fun. But then the next bit was even better when you had the other Tom Hiddleston Loki come in, and this is basically the Loki that we kind of knew. And I love seeing the difference between Tom Hiddleston's performance here. It was a good, fun scene that sort of, you know, fell into chaos. I loved Alligator Loki getting his hand biting off the hand of Tom Hiddleston Loki, the new one. All really fun stuff. Tom Hiddleston's great, but I think what this does is like subtly reinforces how different our Loki, the Loki we've been watching, has changed here, because the other Tom Hiddleston Loki that shows up, the one wearing the president button, he's the Loki that we kind of already knew, backstabbing people, betraying people, and, you know, Tom Hiddleston's playing it in that way, the classic Loki that we've known. And you see the difference with our Loki. And I love just his moment of like exasperation at this whole event going. I was like, oh my God, are we really doing this? And this betrayal and backstabbing, because that's what he lived on for so long. So it was a fun scene, but it really evoked the character well and showed us the distinction between where Tom Hiddleston's Loki was and is now. I think that's just absolutely fantastic. Great stuff. Then we get Sylvie and Mobius meeting up in the Void. I loved they didn't have a lot of moments, but I just liked their moments between the two of them. I like him saying sorry to her, and Mobius really showing that he's changed. I mean, these two actors are doing such a great job, and Owen Wilson just does a fantastic job of showing that Mobius has really turned a corner and sort of fallen out from the TVA, and willing to forgive, or willing to, you know, say, I'm sorry, not to forgive. And I really bought it, and Owen Wilson, credit to him, he doesn't get a lot to do in this episode, but every moment that he has in this episode, he uses it to show us that Mobius that's kind of changed. Absolutely adored that. I also loved finally when Sylvie and Loki finally meet up again. Wonderful scenes here. I loved Mobius kind of talking about like the alligator Loki. He's like, well, he might be lying about being a Loki, but that would probably make him more likely to be a Loki. Lots of fun stuff. The alligator Loki bit was just hilarious and just had me dying. I love alligator Loki so much. I'm not kidding. I want an alligator Loki show so bad. But then also the stuff between Sylvie and Loki, you know, with the blanket and all that stuff. I again just really highlighted everything that I've loved about this performance from Tom Hiddleston and Sylvie as well. It was so nice underplayed writing of Loki. He makes himself a blanket and then he offers it to Sylvie, and she doesn't really take it. It's a little bit uncomfortable. But then the bit where, you know, he says, you know, there's something more than I want than just rule and things like that. And then he gives her more of the other blanket. It was just nice, subtle, like, beats within that conversation that didn't overplay the moment, but kind of said everything you need to get about what Loki was going through. And I like the moment where Sylvie says, how do I know you won't betray me? And Loki, and I believe him that he's changed now. And you believe that through Tom Hiddleston's performance, in that moment. Now, I'm sure that that's going to be something that gets played at the last episode that's going to come back up. We'll see how much he's actually changed, but I buy it here. I really do. And I'm sure that's going to be the crux of his final moments in this season. But I think it's just a wonderful arc, and you really see how much he's changed here. Truly phenomenal stuff in all of that. But then we get the final showdown, which, again, I think this is the weakest part of the episode. And not that it's necessarily bad, but it's just sort of like CGI monster that they're facing. And it was a cool looking monster. I liked it. I'm sure it's from the comics. I'm sure people know it from somewhere. But it is kind of one of those CGI mess clouds. It kind of looked like the thing from Green Lantern, Parallax from Green Lantern. Didn't really do anything for me, but I liked the way that it was utilized. That it was this big monster, but it was sort of Loki coming to be like, we can do this. We are more powerful than we believe. You know, Loki can enchant this thing with Sylvie, sort of showing how powerful and how much they've grown and how much they can do more than they actually believe that they can. And Richard E. Grant just building up Asgard and using his power of illusion and just really reveling in it was just so much fun. Richard E. Grant was just fantastic in these moments in this episode. Yeah, just absolutely balls to the wall, a lot of fun. So while it was a big CGI monster fight, and while that is the weakest part of it, I do think that the moments that were within that were so much fun and coming out of character beats and just using the CGI monster cloud to sort of facilitate those, I think were really fantastic. And I loved using the fun of Richard E. Grant to show that Lokis are powerful, more powerful than they give themselves credit for. All excellent. All a lot of fun. But then I think the only thing that really bugs me about it is I'm not entirely sure how enchanting makes it open up a portal at the end of time, at the end of the episode. I feel like they just sort of controlled it and got out of the way. I get it. It's just sort of like yada, 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 yachting the magic of the stuff. But yeah, it didn't really totally make sense to me, but it worked on a character level. So fine with it. I'll let it go. I'll let it slide, even though I'm not entirely sure of the weird time traveling mechanics going on here. But then we get the end of the episode with him going off to this weird looking mansion, which again, I'm sure some comic book fans from Marvel, I'm more of a DC fan from the comics, so I'm sure Marvel fans may know what that means. I hear hints and rumblings of who possibly the Timekeepers might be. But I am curious to see where this is going to go. So I'm sure I missed a thing or two within all of that gushing, but I really had to gush about this episode. This was fantastic. This is everything that I wanted from this show. It pushed me. It had great character moments. It was crazy. It was balls to the wall. Some great, fantastic performances. Some great subtle writing. Yeah. If this next episode manages to stick the landing, which might be a tall order considering that the other MCU series have not done that so far, the Disney Plus MCU series. You know, I haven't loved WandaVision or Falcon and Winter Soldier's finale, so it might not happen. But if they manage to just stick the landing with this episode, coming up next, this might have the chance to be one of my favorite MCU projects ever. They have done such a great job so far, and I'm fingers crossed that they're able to stick this landing, because I really want them to, because this show is just, I love it. I love this show. And yeah, this episode was the epitome of that. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for watching this. I would love to hear your comments down below. I'd love to, if you want to subscribe to this channel for more reviews, stuff like that. Don't forget to subscribe to my main channel. I have a Patreon that you can help me out on. But beyond all of that, thank you so much for watching. And I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper.